25 years. A quarter of a century. That's how long I had been walking through the doors of Harrison Technologies every morning. How long I had been pouring my creativity, my expertise, and my life into building something I believed mattered. 25 years of early mornings and late nights, of breakthrough moments and frustrating setbacks, of watching a small startup grow into a billion-dollar company. 25 years of loyalty, dedication, and the kind of institutional knowledge that can't be replaced or replicated. And it ended with a cardboard box and a security guard. My name is Elena Rodriguez, and I used to be the Chief Technology Officer at Harrison Technologies. I say used to be because on a Tuesday morning in March, after 25 years of service, I was escorted out of the building like a criminal, with no explanation, no conversation, and no opportunity to say goodbye to the team I had built and mentored. I had arrived at work that morning like any other morning. I had my coffee, checked my emails, and was reviewing the quarterly innovation reports when my assistant knocked on my door. "Elena, Victoria wants to see you in her office. She says it's urgent." Victoria Harrison was the CEO, the daughter of the company's founder, and technically my boss. She had inherited the company when her father died 5 years earlier, and while she was intelligent and business savvy, she had never quite understood the technical side of what we did. I had been working at Harrison Technologies since before Victoria was born. I had known her as a child who occasionally visited the office with her father, had watched her grow up, had celebrated when she graduated from business school. In many ways, I had been like an aunt to her, someone who had been present for major milestones in her life. That relationship, I thought, meant something. I was wrong. When I walked into Victoria's office, she was sitting behind her desk, not looking up from her computer. There was a security guard standing near the door, which should have been my first warning that this wasn't a normal meeting. "Victoria, you wanted to see me?" She finally looked up, and I could see something in her expression that I couldn't quite identify. Not anger exactly, not sadness. Something colder than either of those emotions. "Elena, we're making some organizational changes. Your position is being eliminated, effective immediately." I stared at her, trying to process what I was hearing. "My position is being eliminated?" "Yes. Jim will escort you to your office to collect your personal belongings. We'll need your badge, your laptop, and your phone." 25 years. And this was how it was ending. No explanation, no discussion, no acknowledgement of what I had contributed to this company. "Victoria, I don't understand. What organizational changes? Why wasn't I consulted about this? I'm the CTO, you were the CTO. The position is being restructured. We're moving in a different direction." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "What different direction?" "Victoria, I built this technology department. I developed most of our core products. I trained the entire engineering team. You can't just eliminate my position without Elena. I understand that this is unexpected, but the decision has been made. You'll receive a severance package that reflects your years of service. Jim will help you collect your things." The security guard, Jim, stepped forward with a cardboard box. A cardboard box, like I was some entry-level employee who might steal office supplies on the way out. "Victoria, we need to talk about this. There are projects in development, patent spending, team members who report to me. You can't just..." "Elena, please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." I stared at this woman, this person I had known since she was a child, and realized that I was looking at a stranger. The Victoria I thought I knew would never have treated anyone with this level of casual cruelty, especially not someone who had been loyal to her family for 25 years. "You're not even going to tell me why?" Victoria looked back at her computer screen, dismissing me as if I were an interruption to her more important work. "You'll understand with time," she said, not looking at me. "You'll understand with time." As if I were a child who needed to be protected from adult conversations. I felt Jim's hand on my elbow, gentle but firm, guiding me toward the door. "Ma'am, if you could come with me to collect your belongings." I walked through the office I had occupied for 15 years, past the awards and recognition plaques, past the photos of product launches and team celebrations, past the whiteboard covered with diagrams and equations that represented months of work. Jim handed me the cardboard box and stood watching as I packed my personal items. 25 years of my professional life, reduced to a box small enough to carry with one hand. My engineering team was watching from their cubicles, their faces confused and concerned. These were people I had hired, trained, mentored, people who looked to me for guidance and leadership. And I was being walked out like a security threat, with no opportunity to explain what was happening or to ensure continuity on our projects. "Elena, what's going on?" asked David Chen, my deputy CDO and the person I had been grooming to take over some of my responsibilities. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I'm being let go, effective immediately." "But why? What about the new product launch? What about the patents we've been working on?" "I don't know," I said again, because Victoria had given me no information, no context, no explanation that I could share with the team that was depending on me. Jim escorted me to the elevator, through the lobby, and out to the parking lot. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the building where I had spent the majority of my adult life, trying to understand what had just happened. I had been fired. After 25 years of dedication, innovation, and loyalty, I had been discarded like a broken piece of equipment. But why? My performance reviews had always been excellent. The products I had developed were the backbone of the company's success. The team I had built was productive and innovative. Our patent portfolio was extensive and valuable. Unless that was exactly the problem. Over the next few days, I started piecing together what had really happened. I reached out to contacts in the industry, former colleagues who had moved to other companies, people who might have insight into Harrison Technologies' strategic direction. What I learned was disturbing. Victoria had been in talks with a venture capital firm about taking the company public. The valuation discussions had been ongoing for months, and apparently, my salary and position were seen as obstacles to maximizing profits and streamlining operations. I was expensive. After 25 years, my compensation package reflected my value to the company, my institutional knowledge, and my role in developing our core technologies. A younger, less experienced CDO could do the job for a fraction of the cost. At least, that's what Victoria and her advisors had convinced themselves. They had also convinced themselves that the patents and technologies I had developed belonged entirely to the company, that my departure wouldn't affect their ability to continue developing and licensing our innovations. They were wrong about that. You see, over the course of 25 years, I had been very careful about how intellectual property was developed and registered. When I had started at Harrison Technologies, it was a small company with informal processes and limited legal oversight. I had often worked on projects at home, on my own time, using my own resources. The patents for many of our core technologies were registered in my name, with licensing agreements that granted Harrison Technologies usage rights as long as I remained an employee. This was a common practice in the early days of the company, when we were all wearing multiple hats and the lines between personal and corporate intellectual property were less clearly defined. As the company grew and became more sophisticated, newer patents were registered under the corporate name. But the foundational technologies, the innovations that everything else was built on, those were still legally mine. Victoria either didn't know this, or had convinced herself that it didn't matter. She had assumed that my departure would be smooth and uncomplicated, that I would quietly disappear and the company would continue operating exactly as it had before. She was wrong. 2 months after my termination, I was contacted by Harrison Technologies' legal department. "Miss Rodriguez, we're reaching out regarding some intellectual property questions that have come up as we prepare for our public offering." "What kind of questions?" "Well, it appears that several of our core patents are registered in your name rather than the company's name. We need to clarify the ownership and usage rights." I almost smiled. "The ownership is quite clear. Those patents belong to me. Harrison Technologies has been operating under licensing agreements that were contingent on my employment. Miss Rodriguez, surely you understand that those technologies were developed while you were working for Harrison Technologies. Some of them were developed on my own time, using my own resources, before I had a formal employment agreement with the company. Others were developed under the licensing agreements I mentioned. If you'd like to review the documentation, I'd be happy to provide it." There was a long pause. "Miss Rodriguez, we'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss this situation. I'd be happy to meet with you. Please have your licensing and royalty proposal ready for review. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. I arrived at Harrison Technologies offices, the offices where I had worked for 25 years as a visitor, signing in at the front desk like any other outsider. Victoria was there, along with the company's head of legal, their new CTO, a man 15 years younger than me with half my experience, and a representative from the venture capital firm that was backing their public offering. "Elena, thank you for coming in," Victoria said, as if we were casual business acquaintances rather than someone she had known for her entire life. Victoria, the head of legal, a man I had never met before, took the lead. "Miss Rodriguez, we've reviewed the patent documentation, and while we acknowledge that there are some irregularities in how these were originally filed, we believe that Harrison Technologies has a strong claim to ownership of these innovations." Based on what? Based on the fact that you were an employee of Harrison Technologies when these technologies were developed, and that the company invested resources in their development. I opened my briefcase and pulled out a thick folder of documentation. "Let me clarify a few things for you," I said. "First, here are the original patent applications, filed in my name, with clear documentation of the development timeline and resources used. Second, here are the licensing agreements that granted Harrison Technologies usage rights. Third, here are the employment agreements that specify the terms under which intellectual property would be shared. I distributed copies of the documents around the table. As you can see, everything was done legally and appropriately. Harrison Technologies has been operating under valid licensing agreements for 25 years. However, those agreements were contingent on my continued employment." The venture capital representative leaned forward. "Miss Rodriguez, what exactly are you proposing?" "I'm not proposing anything. I'm informing you of the current legal situation. Harrison Technologies no longer has licensing rights to these patents. If you want to continue using these technologies, you'll need to negotiate new licensing agreements with me." Victoria finally spoke up. "Elena, be reasonable. You can't just hold the company hostage because you're upset about being let go." "I'm not holding anyone hostage, Victoria. I'm protecting intellectual property that legally belongs to me. Property that you assumed you could continue using without my permission after you fired me without cause or explanation. We offered you a generous severance package. You offered me a standard severance package after 25 years of service. You walked me out of the building like a criminal, gave me no explanation for my termination, and provided no transition period for the projects I was overseeing. Now you want me to continue licensing my intellectual property to you for free?" The room was quiet for a long moment. "What are you looking for?" the head of legal asked. "I want fair compensation for the use of my intellectual property. I want recognition of my contributions to this company. And I want an acknowledgement that the way I was terminated was unprofessional and disrespectful. What does fair compensation look like?" I pulled out another document from my briefcase. "I've had the patents independently valued by 3 different IP assessment firms. The average valuation is $47 million. I'm willing to license ongoing usage rights for a monthly royalty payment of 3% of gross revenue from products that incorporate my technologies." The venture capital representative's face went pale. 3 of gross revenue? That's millions of dollars annually. Yes, it is. These patents are fundamental to your core product line. Without them, you need to completely redesign your offerings, which would take years and cost far more than licensing fees. Victoria was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Elena, you're destroying the company." "No, Victoria. You destroyed my career and assumed there would be no consequences. I'm simply protecting intellectual property that belongs to me." The meeting ended without resolution, but I could see the panic in their eyes. Harrison Technologies was scheduled to go public in 6 months. If they couldn't resolve the IP issues, the offering would be delayed or canceled entirely. Over the next few weeks, I received several calls from their lawyers, each offering slightly better terms than the last. But they were still trying to negotiate from a position of strength they didn't actually have. Meanwhile, I had started consulting with other companies in the industry, companies that were interested in licensing my technologies for their own products. Harrison Technologies was no longer my only option for commercializing my innovations. 3 months after my termination, Victoria called me directly. Elena, we need to talk. I'm listening. This isn't how I wanted things to go. The board pressured me to make cuts to streamline operations before the public offering. Your position was expensive, and they convinced me that we could maintain operations with a less senior CTO. And now our lawyers are telling me that we can't go public with these IP issues unresolved. The due diligence process has revealed that our core technologies aren't actually owned by the company. That's correct. Elena, what do you want? Really? I thought about this question for a long time before answering. I want recognition, Victoria. I want acknowledgement of what I contributed to this company for 25 years. I want fair compensation for my intellectual property. And I want assurance that other long-term employees won't be discarded the way I was. And if we provide those things, then we can discuss licensing terms that work for both of us. The final agreement took 2 months to negotiate. Harrison Technologies issued a public statement acknowledging my contributions to the company's technological development and expressing regret that my departure had not been handled more appropriately. They agreed to pay me a lump sum of $15 million for past usage of my patents, plus ongoing monthly royalties of 2% of gross revenue from products incorporating my technologies. They also established a policy requiring 6 months' notice and a proper transition period for any executive terminations, ensuring that other long-term employees wouldn't face the same abrupt dismissal I had experienced. Victoria asked to meet with me privately after the agreement was signed. Elena, I want you to know that I never intended to hurt you. The board was pressuring me to cut costs, and I made a decision I thought was best for the company's future. Victoria, the problem wasn't that you needed to make cuts. The problem was how you treated me. After 25 years of loyalty, I deserved a conversation, an explanation, a transition period. I deserved to be treated with basic human dignity. You're right. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Thank you for saying that. We talked for another hour about the company, about her father, about the years we had worked together before everything went wrong. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly, but it was closure. 6 months later, Harrison Technologies went public at a valuation 20% lower than originally projected, partly due to the licensing obligations they now carried. But they went public, and the company survived. As for me, I used part of my settlement to start my own consulting firm, specializing in intellectual property development and patent strategy. I work with small technology companies, helping them protect their innovations and avoid the kinds of legal complications that Harrison Technologies had created for itself. I also work with a select group of established companies, licensing my newer innovations and developing custom solutions for their specific needs. The monthly royalties from Harrison Technologies provide a steady income stream that allows me to be selective about the projects I take on. Most importantly, I've learned that loyalty is only valuable when it's reciprocated, that 25 years of service doesn't protect you from corporate expedience, and that sometimes the best revenge is simply protecting what belongs to you. But here's what I want to ask you. Put yourself in my position for a moment. You've spent 25 years building something, contributing your expertise and creativity, believing that your loyalty and dedication mattered. Then one day, you're escorted out like a security threat, with no explanation, no appreciation, no acknowledgement of what you've contributed. What would you have done in my place? Would you have quietly accepted the severance package and moved on, grateful for the years you had? Would you have fought back legally from the beginning? Or would you have tried to rebuild the relationship? Some people have told me I was vindictive, that I should have been more understanding of the business pressures Victoria was facing. They say I should have been willing to license my patents at a nominal fee, as a gesture of goodwill toward a company where I had spent most of my career. But here's what I keep coming back to. They made a choice about my value to the company. They decided I was disposable, that my contributions could be easily replaced, that my loyalty meant nothing when it came to their bottom line. And I made a choice about my own value. I chose to protect intellectual property that legally belonged to me. I chose to demand fair compensation for innovations that were fundamental to their business. I chose to insist on being treated with dignity and respect. Do you think that was the right choice? Do you think there's ever a justification for the way Victoria handled my termination? I'm genuinely curious about how other people would navigate this situation. You know what really gets to me? It's not just that I was fired after 25 years. It's that Victoria was so confident I would just accept it, that I would quietly disappear and let them continue benefiting from my work without compensation. She thought my professionalism meant I would absorb any amount of disrespect without fighting back. She thought wrong. My professionalism meant I had been careful about protecting my intellectual property rights from the beginning. My experience meant I understood exactly what leverage I had. My business sense meant I knew how to negotiate from a position of strength. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Victoria had just been honest with me about the company's financial pressures. If she had come to me and said they needed to restructure, that they couldn't afford my current compensation, that they needed me to take a reduced role or consider early retirement. Would I have been hurt? Yes. Would I have been willing to discuss alternatives? Probably. Instead, she chose the path of maximum disrespect and minimum honesty. And she learned exactly what happens when you underestimate someone who spent 25 years building the foundation of your business. If this story resonates with you, if it makes you think about your own professional relationships or your own capacity to protect yourself when loyalty isn't reciprocated, then maybe that's exactly what needed to happen. Maybe we all need to be reminded that we don't owe our expertise and creativity to people who don't value them. What would you have done in my place? How would you have handled discovering that decades of loyalty meant nothing when it came time for cost cutting? Tell me in the comments. I'm genuinely curious about how other people would handle this kind of professional betrayal. Share this if it moved you. And remember that your own story of professional dignity and self-respect is still being written. You have more power than you know, and you deserve to work with people who value your contributions.